He's right there.
Oh, look at him.
Oh my gosh. That was a little close for comfort.
Well, looks like we have
Very unexpected special guest.
I've been so excited for this podcast episode because Kit Patterson here is one of my favorite people in the whole world. I refer to him as Mom. We don't know how that arrived.
Still don't know.
but that's the title. And of course I have my incredible, lovely, beautiful wife. I'm so excited to get to share this podcast episode with her. Thank you both for being here for this awesome episode of the Paramotor podcast. You are the president of Luckenbach, Texas. I don't know if we have any country fans here, but it goes a little something like, let's go to Luckenbach, Texas with Waylon and Willie and the boys.
And Anthony.
And Anthony. And Anthony. Do you sing country music?
No, you don't want to hear me sing.
Oh, man.
I appreciate singing. I have musicians and artists in my family, and I'm kind of the left brain of the family who enjoys it, helps provide opportunities for others to share their talents in that regard. Oh, that is not my gift or talent.
Wow. So I was telling my mom today about Luckenbach. I was like, yeah, my friend Kit, he's the president of Luckenbach. She says, you mean he's the mayor? After hearing it in the songs, I thought it was like a town or a city in Texas.
It is an actual place. I mean, some people think it's just a state of mind, but it is an actual place.
Yeah.
Just west of Austin.
Yeah.
Just outside of Fredericksburg. In fact, actually the address is a Fredericksburg address.
Uh-huh.
But it was an unincorporated community that was settled by German immigrants, like a lot of the German and Czech.
Like Fredericksburg is, right? Is that right?
Now, Fredericksburg's an actual city.
Right, okay.
When I say unincorporated, they settled there. They typically built a dance hall, a trading post.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the community center. It's what brought people together. Fredericksburg's about 12 miles away.
Uh-huh.
Well, back in 1849, that was a long way.
Yeah.
Right? So
for sure.
You had other gathering places or communities not too far away. And a lot of them have kind of disappeared and gone by the wayside.
But not Luckenbach.
In fact, so it was similarly the Luckenbach school. It was a little one-room schoolhouse. It closed in like 1964.
Yeah.
Everything was consolidating into Fredericksburg. And the Engel family that had bought Luckenbach, that owned the land where the dance hall and the general store and post office was, put it up for sale. And this is when my grandfather, Hondo Crouch, bought it. I describe his personality as a mix between Will Rogers and Peter Pan, if that helps.
I thought you were going to say a grouch because it's crouch.
Crouch.
He had an overactive imagination. And for years, he wrote a politically incorrect newspaper column in the Comfort paper.
Really?
About a make-believe town and make-believe people. And Luckenbach kind of became his real-life make-believe town, if you will.
That's fascinating. How cool, though.
So it was him and his music-making friends that kind of brought a new life to Luckenbach and put it back on the map, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm curious about this column.
Well, he wrote about a place called Big Flat and Mrs. Worstbottom and everything. Everyone had different names, and it was just, some satire, some just tongue-in-cheek, poking fun. He always loved to elevate and celebrate the common things in life.
Yeah.
And kind of pull the rug out from people who thought they were a little bit more somebodies than others. In fact, our motto is everybody's somebody in Luckenbach.
That's so cool.
Jumping ahead into the 90s when we hosted Willie Nelson 4th of July picnics at Luckenbach.
Yeah.
We were backstage on his bus. I had my whole family there.
That
I've got
so
my
cool.
oldest son who was 6 months old in my first Willie Nelson 4th of July picnic onesie.
Wow.
At 6 months old. And at the time, my mother was making these custom cool cowboy hats called Hondo's hats. And she had made one for Willie and put it on him on the bus. And he looked like Baby New Year because it was too big. But quickly quirked, that's okay. We all wear the same hat size in Luckenbach. So I share that because the motto, everybody's somebody in Luckenbach, that kind of describes the ethos, if you will, in Luckenbach.
It's amazing that you remember this, because if Willie Nelson was there, wouldn't you be high?
So we were on his other bus.
You never partook in any of that?
No. I was a athlete since age 10 and through college, and actually never talked about other family members, but I had an uncle who, while he was at UT, he was like pure genius, like 1600 SAT, ended up having schizophrenia after having some bad, I don't know what he took or whatever back in the 60s.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. And at a young age too, I had a brother who passed away when I was 16. My best friend committed suicide. So at a young age, that right-sized a lot of how I saw life, I guess, in another way. So
how would you describe your childhood?
Man, I had a good childhood, very colorful family. I didn't realize how known my family was between my grandfather, Hondo, who was actually in my sociology book at the University of Texas.
That is so cool.
And Texas Monthly had dubbed him the most professional Texan. Swimming, I went through high school. I was the top 2 in the country in my sport when I graduated from high school and went to the University of Texas to swim there. Where my brother had actually been before me. He was 3 years older than me, and where he actually had an accident and where he passed away. So
he had an accident.
It was a car accident.
Oh yeah. How old were you at that time?
I was 16.
Damn.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tough.
That was devastating. It makes you ask a lot of questions, mainly why, right? At 16 years old, it's hard to put into perspective when things happen like that and make sense of it.
Do you remember your parents through that time and how they coped with the loss of their kid?
Very differently. My mother was absolutely devastated. Her firstborn, passed away, and we were all devastated. But everyone kind of tends to grieve in different ways. I was one of 3 boys. I was the middle. Right. And with all the things that have happened in my family, kind of like people would ask me, how did you, you're so normal compared to, the characters, I guess, in my family, maybe slip through the cracks is kind of how you might put it. Like I mentioned, 6 weeks later, my best friend committed suicide, and that was just overwhelming. So really my family, my friends, and my sport were kind of the 3 legs of the stool that my life sat on.
Yeah.
Personally, I poured myself into my sport in so many ways. And I look back, it was really kind of gracious of the things that my identity, if you will, that was solely placed in these things. And actually made me realize that life was bigger than that there's a God bigger than that. So I don't think I ever told you, Anthony, why I was actually down at the coast when you actually took your first flight. But I actually called Ron or messaged him a day or two before. He had room at the Airbnb for me to stay with you guys. And I knew my brother who passed away, it would have been his 50th birthday that weekend.
Wow.
So I went down to just go actually celebrate.
Him.
And one afternoon, I don't remember how much fuel I ended up launching with, but I literally flew until I ran out of gas.
Wow.
I just went until I ran out of gas, and then I hooped and hollered and wished my brother happy birthday all the way down.
Oh, man.
That's so special.
So that was really the impetus behind why I drove down there and why I was there by meeting up with you guys.
Right.
Connecting. In the
that's
first
incredible.
place.
That's incredible that such a sweet, sentimental story led to us actually becoming friends.
Yeah. He was a cool dude.
I believe it. If he's your brother, he's got to be.
You honor him to this day. So that's sweet.
Yeah.
So how did you get into paramotoring? What was the very first thing that crossed your mind when you were introduced to the idea? What happened?
So it was two parts. The first was probably 25 years ago. I was up in Idaho, and it was actually a powered parachute. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I was watching a guy do touch and goes at sunset right on the Snake or Salmon River. And I went over to visit with him. Turned out he was an instructor, and he asked if I wanted to go up, and right at sunset, and I was pretty much hooked of the experience. It was beautiful. Right. It was so serene. That was like 25 years ago. Then about 13 years ago, saw a video on YouTube.
Do you remember the video?
This guy, actually, I was following, he trains firearms in Arizona. Haley Strategic is a website. And
Haley Strategic Partners.
Yes. Is it Matthew? What's his first name?
Travis.
Travis Haley. That's his name. My experience going up on the powered parachute and watching that,
right.
You know, I was like, I'm doing that. Now, from the moment that I knew I was going to do that, it was maybe about 4 years before I actually got trained and took my first flight.
Yeah.
Life, right? You got to make room for it.
Sure.
Ryan Southwell did a edit. I think it was of Scout's first trip to Iceland.
Oh yeah.
And I know Travis Haley was in that video.
Yeah.
He's one of the pilots there. But it was so beautiful. And it's definitely, when people ask me about flying, I share that video.
Yeah.
It's a great example, not only the camaraderie and the community,
right,
but the flying and the scenery.
Right.
It's all in that video.
Yeah, for sure.
Captures the essence of what drew you to
does.
Paramotoring.
Ryan Southwell actually came and visited Leandra and I after I got out of the
wife,
with his
yes.
wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after I got out of the hospital. It was great meeting him because just like for you, Ryan Southwell was a huge inspiration to me. For me, the video that inspired me the most was the toll road.
That too.
In that video, it was his friend who had passed away while filming a video. Right? Such a powerful thing. Did you have any fears about the risk when it came to getting into flying these paramotors? Because here you are, it took you 4 years to get into it. It's such a, that stemmed from 20 years prior, right? When you took that powered parachute flight. Along that way, was there anything, red flags that came up in your mind that thought, oh, this might be a little bit dangerous? And this is a little bit of foreshadowing because eventually, as we'll get into here in a little bit, you have had some incidents that things went really south. So was there any sort of fear of that happening?
I think there's always a healthy level of fear when you're looking at doing something that has, potential to hurt yourself or kill yourself.
Yeah.
My first questions were, how can I hurt myself doing this? I wanted to research every which way.
Sure. Yeah.
You can hurt yourself.
Yeah. Cause you can rule out, you can say, okay, if I don't do that, then I'm not going to die that way
Yeah. And so then the other important thing is instructors and people who have been there, done that, and can teach you what you don't know.
Sure.
Because you don't know what you don't know, as we always say.
Yeah.
In paramotoring. So by the time I actually took my first flight in those 4 years that I was dreaming of being able to do this, I was flying in my head. I felt like I knew. I'd learned quite a bit.
I totally
was very proactive in speaking to other pilots and calling folks or messaging. And I just, by the time I was out on the training field, I felt like I'd already kind of done it a couple times.
That's crazy that you say that. Like, so similar for me. I remember kind of like mentally going through it in my mind prior to going to training and just feeling as though I understood the physics to a certain degree.
I feel like for me, it was very rushed, it was very, this is how you do this, spend some time kiting, which we did, go to training. And it was like, okay, this is how you do this. Now you're just going to do this, that, and then go. And it was like, tonight you're doing your first flight. I was like, okay. And meanwhile, he's kind of freaking out and he's like, are you sure? Are you okay? Like, do you feel? And I was like, yeah, right. Like, let's do it. And then, but it was because I had zero exposure really other than Anthony flying.
And Leandra also doesn't have a background of extreme sports and highly athletic sort of things.
Yeah.
Now motorcycles came later in my life, but I grew up with an uncle who was like an adrenaline junkie.
Okay.
Like dynamite on the 4th of July, airplanes. He was a crew chief, helicopter mechanic.
Oh, hell yeah.
In Nam,
Freedom.
So everything with, motors and burns gas, and he knew how to fix it and he knew how to push it to the limits. You know? And as a kid, on the ranch at 10, 11, 12 years old with an uncle like that, sometimes I actually did get scared sometimes because pretty intense, you know?
Yeah. You felt as though you had an understanding by the time you went to training. Did that actually play out as you had imagined it to? Where did you go
I'll never
for training?
forget my first flight. So
where were you?
So it was Austin Paramotor.
Okay. Was that Brian West?
Brian West and Corey Reynolds. Good dudes. Once I was off the ground mentally, it was pegged full throttle and you're good, climb up, get altitude.
And how are you feeling at that point?
Elated.
Really?
Oh, I left the ground and I was both arms and both legs fist and leg pumping.
Really?
Yes. Once I was off the ground.
So opposite. And you were there for my first flight. I was mortified. I had no clue that I was actually going to be scared, but I was scared. Dude, you can tell it from being on the ground because I looked like a rock star up there doing barrel rolls on accident. No.
I think I had a little more time on the ground than you did as well, maybe. You know, it was really as the weather goes and as you go.
We didn't really have the best of weather during our training. So when weather doesn't line up, you kind of do feel a pressure to try and get your students in the air. Not that was ever the case with me with getting my students, because Lee's one of my students. And if the weather's not right, like, you're not going to fly. But in some of these flight places, like these flight trainings, people are coming in from out of town.
Yeah.
So
you
it's
only
like
have so many days.
Right.
I started class in September. My first flight wasn't till December. And some of that was I traveled in between. I was gone.
Yeah.
And so again, it was just kind of more time.
Sure.
You know, the guys that were in my class, you know, there were a couple guys that flew, you know, I don't know, it was maybe a week or so or two before I flew because I ended up out of town on that day, and then the weather.
So there you were. You took off and you're just on cloud 9.
I was elated because I understood, you know, on the ground and then landing, you know, once you're in the air, I mean, as far as the risk, right?
Sure.
And kiting and the built, you know, potential to bust something.
Yeah.
But once you're off the ground and you're pegged full throttle, I knew you're golden, right? I mean, we're a beautiful field, you know, plenty of room to land out if that was the case. But I had a great first flight. It was wonderful.
Man, that's super sweet. This is a good opportunity to mention that our viewers can submit questions by going to patreon.com/Anthony Vella. And we asked the community for some questions for Mr. Kit Patterson here. And this guy, Robert Beckson, says, "Hey, Anthony and Kit, I'd like to know about Kit's progression throughout his years of paramotoring and his mistakes that we can all learn from, especially when we get to Kit's level of skill." So can you walk me through from that first flight how you progressed?
I think it's universal with any craft, any sport, where the fundamentals are so important, the basics, right? And mastering the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And so an understanding of knowing that if you can master the basics, then you can extend out, so to speak, almost, you know, put yourself a little further out there, and you're building out a way to where you can extend your skills, but you've mastered each step to get there. So it's safe, you know, you're confident.
Like a building block.
Skills. You're building on your prior skills. And so that's why I don't care what sport you do, the fundamentals, your technique.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, I trained on this 28-meter universal. One of the best things I ever did was fly it until I felt like it became an extension of my body, that wing. And I think a lot of pilots do feel compelled to bump up their wings prematurely because, they're faster, they're a little bit more fun, but they also cover up poor technique. So if you're going to do a wing over on a big boaty, you know, ENA or E&B wing, if you don't time it right, you're going to get wingtip collapses. Whereas if you're on a hotter wing, it's just going to carve and it's going to cover.
So pressurized. It's much more heavily loaded. And so the speed and the internal pressure of the glider means that technique is not as important. I mean, it is as important, but it just doesn't give you the signs like that beginner glider will, right?
So I flew that wing. I had my own instructors say, "Hey, you really need to upgrade your wing," because they were actually a little concerned that on that wing, the wing overs I was doing were actually too big.
They're huge, dude.
For that glider.
Yeah.
So, and I eventually did, and I ended up, again, just my own internal voice is I'm always want to be conservative and cautious.
Yeah.
And the idea of hotter gliders was intimidating to me, even if I had the skill or my instructors like, hey, you know, they actually advised that I go up 2 gliders when I did, because I had built the fundamentals on the basic glider.
Yeah.
And looking back, it's one of the things that I'm so glad I did, because not only each time you bump up a glider, it's like a whole nother experience. when you're flying because it's the characteristics of flight change so much.
Does it feel like the first time all over again?
Yeah, yeah. So enjoy the progression. You know, it's not about trying to get to someone's level or to like they're able to do this and I just want to get there as fast as I can.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Totally.
Like enjoy the ride, enjoy each little progression. Because once you get to the hottest glider they make, you know, you kind of, you know, you're not.
You did it.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then-
The progression really isn't the same. So take your time and enjoy that. And some of the mistakes I made, you know, I think I was the first one in class that ever busted a prop on landing.
Well.
Yeah. I think,
on landing.
On landing.
Oh,
Was it like a
okay.
butt landing?
And I'm trying to remember what it was now.
Well,
but,
you busted a prop when I was with
Yes,
you,
yes.
when I first met you. You
well,
busted
so
a
when
prop
I was out at the coast,
on landing too, right?
well, I was doing spot landings.
Yeah.
And I think I was like 12 inches off the X, right? Where I was going to spot land.
Yeah.
And I manhandled it and it made me tumble to the side.
Right.
And left the motor running. It was a clutchless motor.
Right.
And so when that prop's spinning and you hit the cage, you know, there went my prop.
Damn. Are you ready to up your paramotoring game? Look no further than Fly Products USA, the leader in innovative and reliable paramotoring equipment. Fly Products crafts some of the most advanced and well-engineered paramotors and trikes on the market, designed for pilots of all experience levels. Whether you're after the lightweight power of the Eclipse, the rugged versatility of the Rider, or the stability of their world-renowned trike systems, Fly Products delivers performance and durability you can count on. Their design prioritizes safety, comfort, and ease of use, so you can focus on enjoying your time in the air. One of the best parts? Fly Products USA offers exceptional customer service. Having owned several Fly Products paramotors myself, I can tell you it's unlikely you'll ever need much after your purchase. These machines are built to last. But when you do need support, it's reassuring to know that you're backed by a company that genuinely cares about its customers. Their team is knowledgeable, responsive, and ready to help you with anything that you need. So why choose Fly Products? Because you're not just buying a paramotor, you're investing in proven performance, cutting-edge innovation, and outstanding support. Check out flyproductsusa.com today to explore their full lineup and discover why pilots around the world trust Fly Products to take them higher. That's flyproductsusa.com. Your journey starts here. You fly a Nirvana paramotor, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the most expensive paramotor there is on the market, right? That's the reputation it has. I mean, it's got a reputation, but it's so expensive.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Their entry level motor, the Rodeo, really is priced in line with most of the other, you know, high quality.
What's the base model for that go for?
I don't know what it is today, but it used to be around $8,500. I trained on the original Rodeo, I call it a Mark I, the original version. When they came out with the Mark II, I want to say it was about $8,500, $8,750 maybe. There's a lot of high quality things in the design and electric start and Engadget and
it was pretty advanced compared to other
motors. I feel like the Nirvana motors as a whole, I think where they do well, they kind of started out undertuned the motor. You know, heat, vibration, and power. Those are the things, you know, and so lower RPM is going to have lower heat and lower vibration.
Okay.
So they kind of almost detuned the motor.
Right.
To me, kind of for longevity's sake. And it was enough power. It was a Simonini Mini 2 Plus that they kind of customized. That is the Nirvana 200cc motor that they put on the Rodeo. It's also on their F-Lite. They used to have a 230 that was on the Instinct that I don't know that they're making anymore because the F-Lite has kind of replaced that.
And that's the motor that I saw you flying when I met you, right?
I was flying an OG Rodeo, the Mark I Rodeo.
Okay.
They're really pretty heavy. That was the biggest knock against the original Rodeos. They were heavy.
Right.
About 13 pounds heavier than the current Rodeo.
What does a Nirvana go for today?
I got the prices. So what do you want?
Well, the Rodeo.
The Rodeo is at
8750?
8150.
Oh.
81. That's not it.
No, but look at this.
Why am I thinking that?
No. Listen.
Okay.
Here it goes. The Instinct.
Okay.
$14,700.
Holy cow. What?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know that they even sell any Instincts anymore. Honestly, that's what they used to go for. It was kind of the Ferrari Cadillac of the sky or whatever. It was very heavy.
Yeah.
But it,
Oh, that's why it's so expensive, because material costs.
Everything's carbon.
It's just like
everything on it's carbon
steel
fiber.
costs.
It's very comfortable.
Cast iron.
And it
Like, what the hell?
Well, even
It runs on a Chevy 350.
even the throttle is carbon.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
everything is like really lightweight, high end. When I say lightweight, the motor was heavy.
Yeah, yeah.
And the frame was pretty fragile, right?
So what did it have going for it?
Very efficient. You know, one of the things they've done is that they've got basically a
Efficient? Doesn't that have so the motor was an efficient motor?
The motor, but also the timing. There's like right now, EFI is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
With the
I think it's got a little bit of time before they iron out all the kinks, right?
Right. So, but Nirvana went at it a different way, and it's really efficiency and timing and efficiency in the combustion, if you will.
Yeah, okay.
They have a little computer that monitors and controls that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I was flying a 22 meter Hadron XX
Yeah.
on an F-Lite, which is what I still fly today, I could get 2.5 liters an hour.
2.5 liters in it.
I'd burn like 2.5 liters an hour, which is
What do you think the average paramotor is burning?
I'd say 4 to 6.
Oh wow, yeah.
So
you got the Prius of paramotors.
It's a hybrid.
So Austin Paramotor is a Nirvana dealer. What you train on, I'm always like, support your
Yeah,
dealer,
yeah.
what you can get serviced, what you can get parts
But
for.
not a lot of people are actually repping Nirvana. I mean, it's kind of a rare breed, which is
It is.
interesting because the Austin boys, including yourself, tend to rock the Nirvana. But you guys have some Parajet flyers in your area, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's guys that fly a little bit of everything. They have the Iris and the Parajet, and some people, they'll build their, get a Liberty frame and motor, kind of build their own.
You have experience flying different paramotors, right? Like you've tested out some Parajets or what? So what would you say the comparison is between the Nirvana that you currently own, which is you fly the F-Lite?
I do.
And then how would you compare it to a Parajet Maverick or something else? Chris Simmons, your buddy over there in Austin, a friend of ours as well, he flies Parajet now, right?
Well, he's got a few different motors that he's flown. He had an F-Lite. He also had bought a Liberty frame that he put a Moster on. He's had multiple motors. He's also bought a Sky engine.
Oh, is this the racing one? Like, yeah, this is the competition slalom glider. I think Tucker recently did a video.
Motor.
Yeah, on it. But what about just overall experience comparing yours to just a run-of-the-mill Parajet Maverick, Fly Products Rider, Iris, with the most, basically I'm comparing the Moster 185, which is your staple in the industry, right?
That really is the most popular and common, and that motor goes on a lot of different frames.
Right.
Whereas Nirvana is kind of everything's branded and customized for Nirvana.
Do you feel as though that there's that it all comes together really well because of that?
I think it does. I think that of late it's been a little bit more of a challenge in the U.S. for pilots that fly Nirvana in terms of parts and supplies and all that has been a bit of a challenge. But to me, the experience is nice. I really enjoy it. The original F-Lite that I fly has a very unique harness on it.
Yeah.
And that's not for everyone. They actually came out with and have what's more like a dudek style harness.
Okay.
It's attached to it.
Yeah.
I fly a harness. Originally, Pavel created the F-Lite to be a travel go motor and also to be able to thermal.
Okay. So
it
in
has
the harness,
extreme weight shift. Even in the harness in the seat, there's weight shift.
Is it a split leg harness?
It's not split leg, but it looks like a string bikini harness. I mean, just what's holding it together. It looks like a super lightweight. It's barely there. And of course, I do dynamic sats in it. It's really not designed to be an acro type,
but you can
motor,
take advantage of.
But the engineering in it is very strong, very sturdy, very sound.
Right.
The swing arms, in the harness, it's it's nice.
So once again, what do you think about other manufacturers? Because is Brian West like looking in here, like making sure you don't say anything?
No,
I'm kidding. I've only heard really good things about Brian West.
They stay busy, word of mouth with their school, and they're good dudes. Yeah, Brian and Corey.
Okay, back to the question.
Okay.
What do you think about like a Mostra 185? Just a different engine. You've tried it. You don't. It's just not your cup of tea.
I think just because I've been dialed into the motor I've been flying,
right.
I get you get spoiled when you go out on a long flight, and everybody who's flying the Mostra 185 is having to go back, land, and refuel, and you still got half a tank.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or
that's
whatever.
huge.
That being said, I've flown a MAV. I think I was on a MAV Max. Or it was a 185 with a 140 prop, basically.
Okay.
Same thing.
Right.
On different frames. And it was nice. I liked it. I'm honestly not used to a clutched motor. It's a little bit different in terms of the timing and spooling up.
That's right.
It takes a little bit longer to spool, whereas I'm, clutchless, and man, when I hit the power, my prop's already spinning.
I'm sure that individuals who've never flown a clutchless motor probably would be, just fine flying a clutched motor like the Mostra 185 Plus, right? Like maybe having tried it puts you at this disadvantage where now you just are so
partial to.
What's that?
Like he's so partial to the other.
Partial to it, exactly. Because you've had it.
You really do. You become familiar with what you've flown the most.
Right. Do you think you'll ever go to anything else?
I don't know, possibly. I'm kind of excited about to see what's coming out, in the near future.
Because we've got the EFI probably getting more and more refined. And then did you see, have you looked into the 4-stroke? What's that?
Quattro, EOS Quattro?
The Quattro, yeah, exactly.
No, I know that's been around for quite a while, and it's just really not many people that I know have that motor here in the States.
I think
in England,
for sure,
there's a lot more guys. But again, there's no perfect motor.
Sure.
And if you're getting into the air, safely, reliably, and you're content with the power that you're getting out of your motor and the reliability, Godspeed, you're good.
If it's not broken, don't fix it. Stick with the thing that you love and you have the experience with.
Yeah. But there's so many good options to get you in the air.
Right.
And so I honestly don't feel like I've spent enough time on other motors to have a real solid comparison. But I love the power to weight ratio of the motor that I fly.
Yeah.
I love the reliability of it. Don't have exhaust issues or anything like that. And I flew my motors pretty dang hard.
Well, I would argue that there's not that many options in the world of paramotoring as far as motors go. I think that because the Mostra 185, like we have already mentioned, is a motor that you can slap onto so many different frames, whether it's a Parajet Maverick, Fly Products Rider, Iris, Power to Fly, et cetera, et cetera. You basically have a different frame, same exact motor. Yeah. Now, so you've got the Mostra 185. You've got what's the motor on your Nirvana?
So it's F200. It's a customized Simonini Mini 2 Plus.
A Simonini. Okay, so you got the Simonini. What's another brand?
You got
Polini,
like a Polini 202,
which I don't think in the United States are very common.
They're not. I think there's some guys that are flying them more and kind of figuring the motor out because it's a different kind of carb and the jets for what altitude you're at. You don't adjust it with a screw.
Sure. And then there's the 4-stroke motors. And then finally is the electric motors. Have you ever put any thought into the electric motors? I did record a podcast episode with Paul. He's the owner of Open PPG. Yeah. Have you ever looked into those?
I've watched all the videos. I think it's really cool.
Not for you.
The fly time and the weight, hasn't caught my attention enough to enter that space. So if you could, because I'm heavy on the throttle.
Sure.
I like to fly sideways and upside down. And and distance too. You know, I'm out in the hill country.
Okay.
I love to kind of get some distance and go places.
Right. Can I interject with something one other person said?
Yeah.
You know, speaking of like that style of flying, Clark Culper said, "What's it like doing that slalom flight through 500+ year old oak trees in Luckenbach, Texas?"
That's awesome. I do fly around Luckenbach. I've actually landed and launched out of our parking lot out there. And you got to be mindful not getting too close to, you know, there's a lot of trees out there. So
Clark here says that they're 500-year-old trees out in Luckenbach.
I don't know if they've ever been certified as that many years.
Well, it must have been on the internet somewhere.
It sounds good.
So really at Luckenbach, the canopy of the live oak trees there are pretty magnificent. I mean, it's the outdoor space makes it feel like an intimate indoor space because of the live oak trees.
So can we go car camp out there, Leandra and I?
Yeah.
Because we know the president there. So
We know this guy.
Yeah.
we know a guy. You were talking about like long distance flight. That's your flight style. Electric paramotors may not actually fit that sort of.
Yeah. I think eventually if you get to a point where the amount of energy, the batteries and how long they can last.
Yeah.
I'd be very much interested because, man, you know, no gas, no oil, you know, no carbs. To get clogged. Right. It'll have a different set of issues.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I'm accustomed to the water, not only being a swimmer, but I've put my paramotor in the water a handful of times.
Yeah.
Enough to be asked to actually speak about water safety at fly-ins. And
Okay. Maybe this is the perfect opportunity to segue into you know, some of the incidents that you've had in your flying career. You are super, super talented at flying. Like we've been playing your videos on the backdrop here and it's distracting because watching you fly, it's very entertaining. Mm-hmm. When I watched you fly, when I learned how to fly out there, that first flight day, you were off flying close proximity to us, but you climb up and you do these massive wingovers. And I'm like, damn, this dude is, you know, his skills are something to aim for. And your progression only evolved from there to get more and more dynamic with the sorts of maneuvers that you do. But you, of course, inevitably increase the level of risk when you do push the envelope like that. And the first incident that you showed me had nothing to do with throwing down, as we say. Your first incident was weather related. And we've got a clip here to share with our viewers. And it was a beautiful day. Can you tell us about that flight?
Yeah. So actually there was like 8 or 9 of us all meeting up at the park to fly Lake Travis.
Yeah.
And we'd actually made a pre-flight plan to do a little cross country from Lake Travis up to Lake Buchanan.
Okay.
What's that distance?
I want to say maybe about 35 miles one way, or 25, 30 miles, or 35. We were going to land out, fuel, maybe come back. Anyway, bottom line, we were going to head north and get kind of out of there because it did show some weather, a little potential weather coming in, possibly. But once we got up and it was beautiful, we all got up in there and we kind of ditched the idea of that cross country. So we stayed put right over the lake.
Yeah.
Where we knew there was kind of a little bit of weather. Well, this was basically a gust front that came in with a thunderhead cloud that went from about 2,500 to 3,000 feet all the way to the ground when it started dumping.
There was no indication of this on the apps or.
To my instructor's credit, Corey, he actually texted me in the air, said, "Hey, it just went from 0 to 20 miles an hour at my house."
Oh, damn.
The wind.
Yeah.
And you were in
he said, air? Yeah. And I was in the air, said, y'all
get your butts down.
Get down.
Oh my God.
That's scary.
And so hats off to him. Like, right? That he knew I was in the air even.
Initial reaction upon seeing that message from him.
Yeah. I'm like, yes. Point noted, aware, and we were at that time, we were kind of just heading back and we could see this cloud
on the move,
clouds on the move and developing to where it finally came in where you could see it go all the way to the ground. It's like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
You know, we need to get out. So pretty much everyone went back to the LZ. And when I came in, the LZ is in a bowl.
Yeah.
And the wind was pretty sporadic. At about 200 feet, I got lifted to about 250 feet.
Wow.
Trying to come in to land. At about 75 feet, the wind hit my wing. I'm on that 28-meter universal.
Yeah.
It rocked my wing so hard, it actually spun me around backwards. So
you did a riser twist.
Yes.
Okay.
So now I'm facing backwards underneath my wing at about 75 feet
down
off the ground. And now I'm just trying to figure out, okay, I just need to get turned around. I was able to get turned around, facing forward again. And at that point, I'm about 25 feet off the ground and I have a decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
I can land it or I can try to go around. It's like, man, I am so close to landing the ground. And my ground speed is next to nothing because the wind's so strong. I'm barely moving.
Right. Well, like, how are you doing mentally in this moment? Because that's the big question is how do people actually perform in instances like that?
We all have kind of the lizard brain, right? Like when things happen, all of a sudden you're just like the most basic, simple task. You're thinking very simplistically, right? And you can't think of all the options. Mm-hmm. You're just thinking of making a decision right then and there.
This is your primitive brain.
Primitive brain, yeah.
Primitive,
yeah. Right. My time in sports, high level competition, when you're in big moments, you know, you have to separate yourself from the emotions to stay present. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, I actually things felt like they slowed down to me. Like it was very slow motion.
Right.
Because I'm just hyper focused on everything that's
what's to come.
What's to come. And it's like, I've got to have my mind to make these decisions. You know, I can't let the adrenaline or fear overcome me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when I turned back around at 25 feet, that simplistic brain, my first thing was I decided to land and I cut my motor.
Wow.
Now, this goes back to when I tried to spot land at the beach that day.
Yeah, yeah.
And I learned to shut my motor off before I get down to the ground, right? Because I don't have a clutch.
Sure.
Anyways, but right after I cut my motor off at 25 feet, the wind changed and I went from almost zero ground speed to just falling because the wind is now coming from another direction and I didn't have any speed.
Yeah, yeah. So now your glider's going to drop.
I'm dropping.
Because
I'm falling.
Well, yeah, because what happens is if you are flying along and all of a sudden the wind cuts off, your glider will need to drop to build that airspeed.
Yeah. Or if your motor's on, you could throttle out of it.
You could power it, but when it's
I will
off,
say Kylo Glee has a video. I remember watching it, and this incident happened to him exactly.
Wow.
And he powered out of it.
Yeah.
He had his motor on and he dropped, and I was like, you know, that's, you know, the riser twist and being spun around was enough to take me, you know, once I came back around, I thought I'm safe. I kind of had a letdown of, okay, I'm good. Like that was the most dangerous thing is that I was facing the backside of my wing.
Right. Right.
And then at that time I was like, okay, I'm going to put it down. It was by habit, killed my motor. Without thinking, I was about 100-hour pilot at the time.
Yeah.
Without thinking, I need that power.
Just in case.
In case I need to power out of this. And so normally under calm conditions, punch the motor off, you know, and land.
Right.
But in that situation, oftentimes I'll keep it on until I'm, you know, my feet are touching the ground. Then I'm powering the motor off.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the last 8 feet or so were pretty much, you know,
Straight
a hard
drop,
hard fall.
Yeah.
And with the OG, you know, rodeo, I'm guessing I had about 90 pounds on my back between fuel and reserve and everything else. And and I didn't know that I broke anything at the time. Nothing was compound, fracturing.
You didn't hear a snap?
Didn't hear nothing. I just knew I kind of hit hard, and I'm not as young as I once was, you know. So I mean, bone density. Who knows if I was younger, if I would have been able to.
How old were you when this happened?
Well, this was in 2018.
Yeah,
47.
Wow. Yeah.
47. I just knew when I was on the ground, I didn't want to move my leg, or I in my mind, I was like, I wanted to move, but I just knew that I either couldn't or shouldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, there was like 8, 9, 10 other pilots that flew. I'm the only one that ended up having an incident that day. The only other guy that was still in the air after me, wingovers made him ill. Like he's very, a new pilot.
Sure. Conservative would fly.
Very conservative.
Yeah.
And he landed and told me, Kit, I threw up on myself about 7 times getting down to the ground because it was so turbulent.
Yeah.
Oh.
And he didn't have the piloting skills, if you will, to be able to get to the ground quicker. But he landed fine. He just took his time. He landed about half an hour after I did.
Goodness.
20 minutes, something. I can't remember.
Sure. Yeah.
If you had windsocks up in that LZ in 3 or 4 different places, they would have been pointing different directions.
Oh, man.
So as a young, newer pilot, I didn't know any better. And I was sitting on the ground already thinking, okay, now I know what to do next time. That was my mindset. It's like, and fortunately, I was able to get my leg fixed. And well, ironically, later in February, I'm actually getting the metal that's in my leg out.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. So they nailed my tibia and put a plate on my fibula. And when I say nailed my fibula, there's a 14-inch rod that goes from behind my kneecap to right on top of my ankle. It's kind of bolted in.
Are you going to request to keep it?
Oh yeah, I got it.
I tried that.
We tried and they never gave it to us.
They said, yeah. And then they're like, oh, we forgot.
They're like, they clean it up so quickly. It's gone.
Yeah.
Your burning desire to fly though got you to fly while you were still in a cast, right?
You talking about my leg?
Yeah. I remember you were looking after your crash. We had spoken.
Yeah.
You were on the mend and then you bought a trike because...
Well, actually, Brian West had a trike and allowed me to use it.
Oh, what a good
So
friend.
I'd go out to the Austin Paramotor field and after a bit, had the surgery, had a boot, was able to get around a little bit.
Because I remember you saying, it turns out I can taxi with this boot on my foot.
Yeah.
Right. That's crazy. You really love flying in spite of this scary thing. It didn't stop you from, it didn't scare you enough to get back into the air. And I kind of wanted to explore that because in the position that I'm in, I've had a pretty wild incident myself.
Yeah.
And I still have this desire to fly. And a lot of people, think it's crazy of me to want to go flying again. I feel super confident that I can get back to flying in spite of what happened. I feel like something like what happened to me is avoidable and that I can get back to it. And, you've experienced something similar, not just once, but more than once.
Yeah.
So what do you...
I think number one, why is important. What's your
the
motivation?
Lesson learned?
What's your motivation?
Okay. Yeah.
Like why you're flying, what exactly is about it? Because I had a hard time picturing flying not being a part of my life because to me it's part of my soul care. Like it was such a heart and soul. Yes. And honestly, it's not about flying aggressively or being able to do acrobatics or whatever. To me, that's just kind of a natural personal challenge as you build your skills. When I first started flying, I was just happy to be hanging on to the strings, I didn't want to feel a bump. The beauty of watching sunrises and sunsets does the heart good,
Right. And I don't know how comfortable you are with going into it, but this was also like a more challenging time in your life.
Yeah, definitely. I was at the age, I had a lot of different stresses in my life, business and family.
Right.
And it was opportunity. I think that aside though, in general, I think for most guys, tell me a time, I'll put it this way. I think we lose the ability to laugh and play at too early of an age because you're always trying to be older than you are. You're trying to be the man, provide whatever it is. Even as little kids, look at little boys. Yeah. They're always wanting to
eager to do what the big kids are doing.
Grow up and do things that the older kids are doing.
Yeah.
And I think there's an element of that at some point, and particularly with me, like in sport, everything became really serious. The things I did for fun and play became intense, serious parts of my life. And I think to be wholehearted in a way, you've got to be able to laugh and play and recreate. And that's what, to me, flying, recreation, recreating in the sky, having fun, being able to laugh and play like that is healing. Mm-hmm. It is.
You didn't do any sort of ayahuasca to come to this sort of realization?
No, but I have friends who've done that and have helped them a lot. But with their PTSD and
But I mean, in all seriousness, like I can, some of your experiences and some of the experiences that I've had are similar things, and I think that paramotoring, being able to fly in general, is such an incredible opportunity to feel alive. Yeah. I don't know. It's a healthy distraction, but some people will also suggest that you shouldn't combine emotional trauma, emotional hardship with something that may be considered extreme. They're like, you're doing that because of this. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't know. Do you understand what I'm?
You're doing,
picking up what I'm laying down.
Say that again about you're doing flying because of what, or you're doing
because of something very challenging in your life. As if you're trying to distract yourself, so you're increasing your risk. And a lot of people will say, Lee and I were going to have a conversation about this, about how with PTSD that you'll chase something that could be potentially risky, or even your flying style. You'll increase the level of risk of your flying because you're trying to run from a feeling.
Yeah, I think that's probably true to an extent, but I don't think you typically are conscious of those things. I think there's a certain level of energy that you're having to process or work through, or emotions. And at least for me, when I'm in the air, I think some of that gets expressed that way. So, in terms of working out some energy, I know I have the skills to rip it around and throw some dynamic sats around or something. Yeah. That's fun. It's a release in so many ways. And honestly, I think it's when you have the skill and you become lax. That's when I've found myself getting myself in trouble. And when I've had incidents, it really hasn't been, well,
what we were saying though is it's not that you're running from something, but you're running to something. For people with PTSD, like I tell him, I look to feel alive. I want to get rid of the robot response that, the everyday routine. Yeah. And I want something to make me feel like I'm doing something fun, you're looking for that. And it's not a run from, but it's a run to. Like, help me feel alive again.
I describe it as being wholehearted. It's just a part of your heart that life kind of has a way of covering up, burying you, getting
heavy,
piled on. Yeah. The stress.
Looking to take flight? Welcome to Wind Pirate PPG, Southern Arizona's top destination for paramotoring. Located near historic Tombstone, we're a US PPA and ASC certified school offering expert training, equipment sales, and service to get you soaring confidently. Whether you're interested in trike training, tackling mountain and desert flights, or exploring backcountry operations, we've got you covered. Our large grass training field and 10 square mile dry lake bed provide the perfect environment for safe and secure training flights. We're also proud to be an importer of the Condor Paratrike and carry a range of paramotors and wing brands to suit every pilot. For those ready to level up, we offer advanced training, instructor courses, and ITI ratings to help you take your skills to new heights. Mention the Paramotor podcast when you sign up for training and you'll get $200 off. Adventure is calling. Don't miss your chance to experience the ultimate freedom of flight. Visit Wind Pirate PPG today and let's make it happen. The second incident that was really scary. They say that when things happen in aviation, that it's not just one particular thing, that it's an accumulation of things. How is it defined?
Cascading series of events.
A cascading series of events.
That's why we have him. He's an encyclopedia.
So a cascading series of events. And you kind of painted a picture of a day where you went to the ball game and it was a hot day, maybe a little bit sleep deprived or something like that, just fatigued.
Yeah.
And then you felt, I think you had like.
Well, so I had a great day.
Yeah, there we go.
UT at Alabama.
Okay.
We're playing and went with a buddy, and I'm in the beating sun for 5 hours.
Right.
Halftime, we went in to try to buy some water to hydrate. They had out of water, so my buddy buys me a beer.
Right.
Great. Needed that beer.
It was a really good beer.
It was a really good beer. But that's all I had for those 5 hours. I went home. Man, it was a beautiful evening. Another buddy was going to go fly. We're going to fly Lake Travis. And mentally, I'm like, man, I want to go fly. And the whole goal was just to go cruise a sunset flight.
Yeah.
You know? And in particular, about a month prior to this day, I was doing a really aggressive maneuver and frontaled my wing that caused me to throw my reserve.
Yeah.
And that was pretty intense. So here I am a month after that incident.
Wait, this is when you had to toss your laundry, right?
Yeah. I threw my reserve. So
this
a
was
month prior to this.
The first and only time you ever?
I had taken SIV. I had tossed over water.
But that
I actually needed to toss my reserve and with a motor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, sorry, I had this beautiful sunset flight. Sun's going down. It's time to head back to the LZ.
Yeah.
There's a windy point right off Lake Travis that people hang out on. And I'm about 450 feet up in the air. And I have this thing I do, I call popping the clutch, on a power attack.
Is that with one of these things?
Yes, with bar, pull full speed, full power attack. And then when you pop it or bring it back in, all the energy goes back in the wing. And I can throw a loop.
Was he going 48 miles per hour?
My goal is I'm going to pop the clutch, I'm going to loop, and I'm going to dive down to the surface of the water to cruise along the lake line.
Right.
And there's some boats, and I was just kind of on my way home. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I do that, and I'm on, a really hot wing that carries more energy than the wing I have normally been flying.
Which you're referring to the Dudek Warp 2.
So I'm on the Dudek Warp 2. Most of my time I've spent on the Warp 1.
Right.
Carries more energy. Doesn't roll quite as much, but it carries more speed.
Okay.
And, I maybe had 5 hours on the Warp 2 or 10, not that many, much time. But I'm going to throw it over, and I intentionally just point it straight at the ground because I'm going to do one spiral and be on the surface of the water. Well, once I start pulling those G's out of that, I feel I'm start to gray out. My vision closes in. I'm like, damn. And I'm full throttle, coming down, trying to pull out of it. And next thing I know, I can't see.
Yeah.
That's awful.
So the interesting thing though, is I haven't blacked out. I've grayed out. So I'm still processing in my mind
of what's happening
and what I'm going to do.
Damn.
And I'm just off this windy point off the lake line. And my concern is reaching land where people are and not being able to see.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So my choice is I'm going to stay full throttle and just pray to God that I come back, regain my vision after I come out. And that even though I'm not going to be able to pilot until that point,
right,
I'll stay above ground.
Mm-hmm.
The decision I think I made a conscious decision, but I also question that, right? Like by the time I made that decision, how coherent was I? But I remember letting go of the throttle. I intentionally let go of the throttle and knew that I'd go into the water.
Damn.
And I went in, it was about 6 seconds between hitting the water and when I surfaced, my flotation went off. There was a boat that I had seen coming and they picked me up.
From the video, you're not really doing much once you're in the drink.
No, I'm pretty,
still out of it.
Yeah. I'm still feeling the water. I'm conscious. Like I know I'm in the water, but I just haven't regained my sight yet until finally, it took about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
4 or 5 seconds, I'm guessing. But,
this scared the hell out of you. I mean, I remember when I saw you, you were shaken up by this event. Like,
well, yeah, you and some friends had come to Austin and y'all were flying and
one of them is in our live audience today.
Yes. Yeah. And that incident, really caused me pause. And I had, people that loved and cared about me. And one of my instructors in particular was like, man, I think you should quit flying.
He said that.
Yeah, it's like, as good a pilot as
Brian,
you are.
Brian West said
that was Corey.
Corey, okay. Yeah.
And I took that to heart. And honestly, I had to sit with that and think about it. And I realized I had to quit. If I ever wanted to fly again, I had to choose to quit. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but if you have to do something, then you're not free to do it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. If you have to fly, you're not free not to fly.
You're like chained, shackled to it, basically.
Yes.
I see.
So I made the decision to quit. I just had to quit and take a step back, because those two incidents back to back were just like,
it's dangerous when you get to the point where you're shackled, proverbially speaking, to something, because you're out of control.
Yeah.
If you have to, you therefore don't have control.
If you have to do it, then that's like an addiction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not free to not do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and honestly, the thought of not being able to fly is really sucked.
Right. Yeah.
So I had to give it up.
Do you feel as though there was some level of withdrawals that maybe manifested in the form of frustration, depression, anything like that during that time? Because you did seem a little bit off when, you seemed...
So, throwing my reserve in that instant, I think we talk about fear injuries and that sort of thing. And you go back up in the air and you kind of have these incidents that you kind of feel like you relive.
I was curious. What about that next flight back? But if you're leading to that, by all means, take your time.
Yeah. Well, and so, that was a month. I don't know how many flights I had in between there, but it definitely felt different when I was in the air. It wasn't necessarily as enjoyable because you're the fear injury, right? You have this fear.
You're not immersed in the pleasure of flight in the way that you were before, I assume is what you're saying, because you're so cognizant of
it, whatever incident
of what has gone wrong.
So, but after that, I kind of, my personality is kind of shrug it off, brush it off. I'm like, man, I was dehydrated. I've pulled G's like that and been fine before.
Yeah.
It was just, I went to the game and that's why this happened.
Right.
But I was also on a different glider. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Those aren't excuses.
Those factors, yeah.
Those are, you talk about cascading series of events. That may be so. At the end of the day, though, I've got to be accountable and responsible for myself.
Yeah.
So,
especially if you want to learn from it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I quit. And I knew in the back of my mind, I thought, I know I don't want to quit. I know I want to fly again, but I needed to reset. I needed to just quit. And I went and watched the guys fly. I still enjoyed the community, which is very, to me, that's a big part of the sport, and kind of making the community what you want it to be, being around, and helping other people progress and they're flying and that sort of thing. I enjoy that when I have the time.
You've been a huge inspiration to me. You've been somebody who, if I ever had questions about flying, I can always lean on you for advice, and I have when it came to learning new maneuvers. I was on the phone with you when I did my first SAT, not while I was doing it. This is right. I think I'm doing it. No, but I mean for advice like that. But like you said, the community, like you are a dear friend to us, and I think that the individuals within the sport, just like any other tight knit community, that the relationships that we have in this life are deep and meaningful. Just like the way I see the relationship that Leandra and I get to have with you, and there's still so much to learn, and I hope to learn more from you as I step back into paramotoring. I think that just in this conversation alone, you've opened my eyes to the possibility that flying has been a bit of an addiction to me. You know, where I have to do it. I've woken up in mornings and I feel that it's just who I am. I need to. Yeah. And kind of not going much beyond that. Like it just kind of owns my thoughts.
There's power in surrender.
What do you think, Leandra?
No, I mean,
okay, no, tell me.
I don't know.
No,
I don't.
Tell me. No, I'm kidding.
Y'all have never had that conversation before, have you?
Here comes the frying pan tonight, by the way.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I don't actually have something that I feel so passionate about that has risk, and so it's hard for me to.
Gosh, you're beautiful.
Sympathize, because I don't have that, and but I can try and empathize with you too, especially you, since I know what it does for you. Similarly to you, Kit, Anthony started flying as a form of therapy, and so I think that it has in ways been it has been such a blessing to him, regardless of the actual accident. But I can understand the desire to kind of put yourself in check, right? And say, I kind of need to take a pause, because there have been times, when Anthony first started flying, where it was on the podcast with Matt Woodworth, and what
was it that Woody said during that podcast episode we did all those years ago?
He said there's often times when he comes across people in the sport that he feels will someday succumb to an accident paramotor. Basically, he said, and you, Anthony, are one of those people that I view right now as someone that is pushing it and is going to have an accident someday and possibly die.
Well, he was wrong. I didn't die.
That's not the point. That's not the point. But truthfully, I think that, with regard to the accident, you flew in a way prior to the accident where people would say that. But then after Lee passed away, you took a big break from flying.
That's right.
Super big break from flying. And I don't know, maybe a month before your crash was when you finally started flying again. It wasn't long, I mean, it had been such a long time. But you finally were picking it back up. And I remember having that conversation with you that you were going to be taking a step back, not flying like you used to. And you did for a little. But because you have that addictive personality and that there's this thing about you that you love, and you kind of don't, you almost, like you say, you surrender to it in a way where it then takes control. And so, kind of like the four-wheeler, he told me, he came home the other day and he says, I had such a great ride. And I say, I'm so glad. He says, but you're going to hate the footage. And it's like, come on. Like, it's something that he has
flying, dude.
Because he knows he's pushing it,
But there's something about that flow state. Like there's something, that's what I'm chasing. It's not on a paramotor. It's not necessarily just putting around in the sky for me. It's the connection of the physics. Like there's something that's tangible. It's felt within me when I'm flying, and I can pull that brake and feel the swing and be connected to it. And it's the same thing with the four-wheeler. When the back end cuts loose on the gravel and it slides out at 40 miles per hour as I'm going down a trail that I only have a 1 foot margin on each side. But there's this feeling, the precision that is what I'm drawn to. It's difficult to manage, like the idea of getting back into the air and staying within a certain parameter, I suppose others would consider,
because you're
safe.
Tempted, right? You're easily tempted to get back to that flow state.
Yeah. I mean, but I don't think that would be the case with flying. I think that I would, because of everything that happened and the pain and stuff that, I mean, I know that we would like to share more on my crash and what you went through from finding out and everything like that. And it's something that Leandra and I actually have still like really never discussed, even at home.
I was going to ask you where you're at with all that.
Oh, it's I don't know. I think that's the best answer. And I think it's really hard for me to think about, we've talked in a little bit obviously about it, but I'm actually grateful that he's not physically capable because we don't have to have that talk. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, we can have that talk at a different time.
Got to be able to pick the paramotor up
And,
first.
Hey, Doc, he needs another surgery.
Right? Sorry, something went wrong.
Special baby.
Anthony told me that when he knew that, he could see the ground coming up, right? He's falling. In his mind, he was just telling himself, like, don't die, like, stay awake, don't die. You were losing consciousness. So were you even capable of having those thoughts as you're about to hit the water? Because there was still a level of awareness of what was happening.
Well, that was the unique experience, is that I couldn't see, but I was still conscious.
Yeah.
So it was like I was a blind man flying a paramotor. That's a risk I do not ever want to take or experience.
Yeah.
The only decision I had at that point, it was one simple decision, is do I vice grip the throttle and stay on, or do I let go and just let it play out over the water? And ultimately I decided to let go. But I questioned that decision that by the time I made it that far in my process, how much of a conscious choice that was. That was a willful thought. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that is why I let go of the throttle. It wasn't because I was completely unconscious.
But did you ever think about the potential of dying as a result of what you were about to
Not in that moment.
No.
You get into life and death questions, and we're all going to eject from these earth suits at some point, you know? And so I see myself as not just physical body.
You've definitely done ayahuasca.
More. So in that sense, I don't know that I fear dying in that regard. But I've got so much to live for. Yeah. And my family and my kids and my friends.
And I think that's such an important thing to consider as well. And I've learned that through this experience, is that we do have to be mindful of the connections that we would leave behind. And I think it's, regardless of what your religious belief is, I think that if at the very least you believe that life does go on for others, and that this isn't some sort of selfish experience, a simulation that exists purely for you, that your children's lives will go on, and they'll be in a tremendous amount of pain if they lose their father, just as much as it was for your parents when they lost your brother.
Absolutely.
So I think that is something where I have to maintain that accountability, that choosing to continue to fly is something that could devastate my family if something was to. And I think it's important.
I feel like there was like this opinion of people after the crash. Obviously we have young children, and there was a group of people who said, now is not the time for this. Like, pick it back up when your kids are older. And I can't help but just disagree with that. And I think because I see both sides of the argument, and I share the sentiment of both sides of the argument, but I do feel like your kids are never going to stop needing you, and
your kids need you today, right? And
regardless if your children are young or not, like that rationale doesn't make sense to me. If you're using your children as the means of like the reasoning for stopping, then they just deserve to be the reason, not, well, they're too young. It's like nobody, even if it's prematurely, like nobody wants to lose their parent. We all need them,
But I don't necessarily agree with the idea that you shouldn't, or that I shouldn't fly because I have children. I do think it should change the way you fly. I think that it helps with.
No, yeah, I that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying if people are going to use our children as the means of your reasoning for not flying, they need to understand that there's never going to be a time that our children don't need us.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Want to not let fear kind of dictate the rest of your life. I mean, there's some incidents you could, to shut down. It's like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. And you're already projecting into the future. Yeah. The fear of what's happened in the past. And so you're in bondage to that. You're not free really to live your life to the full, but there is a mantle of responsibility, with your loved ones. Yeah. And so every individual person has to make that decision themselves. And so Other people, they're all going to have an opinion.
Yeah.
You know,
and then I see the other side of it too, that, you know, you can change the way you fly. You can be more a mindful pilot. And I understand that too. And I think that's why I don't know how I feel about it all. And it's because I can hear these different opinions and I can agree with a variety of them. And so it's just kind of challenging. It feels like a big bag to me.
I'll say one of the things I've actually enjoyed doing more is going up like on a tandem trike and flying like a cruise ship in the Love Boat. It's just super chill, right?
Yeah,
and you're also sharing that experience with someone who otherwise wouldn't get to experience that perspective or that experience. So it's a different way of flying. Granted, you're responsible for another person that's flying with you.
Yeah.
But you're not doing crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
It's another perspective, another type of flying.
But I think there's a lesson inside there for your children too, though. Like, as what you're saying is, you know, you have to keep this in mind, not to ruin them. But at the same point, like, if you stop doing what you're doing, are you going to tell them that I'm in fear of this? So you make them afraid of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
And so for me, like trying to raise a boy, I want him to go into the world and just put your nose down, son, and figure it out. Yeah. So
exactly.
So it's a double-edged sword.
It's super tough.
Yeah.
It's super tough, especially when you have little ones looking to you for guidance and how to navigate everything in life.
Right.
Because you want them to be strong. You want them to be resilient. You don't want them to be, you know, have a bad experience and then get scared out of it or something. Like, you want them to power through. And I think it's particularly challenging in the position of, I mean, specifically you, but also me, because it's like, at what point am I, like, how much support am I offering? And because I feel, I agree with both sides of the coin. So it's really tough. And so I can imagine for you, it's tough. I mean, but ultimately I know that I've accepted that you will be flying again.
That's all we needed to hear, folks.
Yeah, but no. But here's the contingency. He has to stay on like a 30-meter flat. No. You can't do any trick wings.
I'll end it with this by saying that I do believe that I'll be flying again. And I know that I have individuals who've been watching my videos who disagree with that desire of mine to continue to fly and actually take steps in that direction. But what I will say is that this experience has taught me that I need to be more mindful of what I'm doing, whether it's going to the ball game and having that drink and then choosing to fly. Those are all choices. People will oftentimes say that you always have the choice of whether you go flying or not. This is not a mandated thing. This is a thing that we can choose to do. And I think that when you line things up, that you do make a significant difference on what the outcome of that flight will be, and particularly whether you will, in all likelihood, land safely and make it home to your family that evening. So when that day comes, I'll tell you, we'll discuss it further in a future video or in a future podcast episode, what that flight plan looks like. I think that there's a lot of ways where I can mitigate the risk to ensure that I can, gently make my way back into the world of flying.
That whole section is where you just focus on Leandra on the camera. Just
say, if we live long enough, life has a way of humbling us. In this sport, the sport humbles everyone, and having our egos right-sized in so many ways.
Yeah.
And being a lifelong student of always having the humility to know that regardless of your skill level, regardless of the things that you can do, we're all learning, and you never stop learning. And to have the healthy respect that no matter what your skill level, you can still get hurt.
Right.
Things can still go wrong.
They can go wrong.
Yes. Yes. There's no way to 100% eliminate the risk of something going wrong. But I believe that there's a hell of a lot that you can do to stack the odds in your favor.
100%.
On that note, I want to thank Kit for being on this podcast. I think that the information has not only taught me a lot, but I think it offers a tremendous amount to all of our viewers out there who are pilots or who are enthusiasts hoping to one day get into flying paramotors. I would never want this podcast or anything that I say to discourage someone from getting into flying because it offers so much. It has offered so much to me, and I'm sure it's offered a tremendous amount to you. And it's offered a lot to you as well because of the man that you're with being the best version of himself in spite of these injuries.
Yeah.
The crash itself has taught me a lot. And I feel like I've grown as a person through this crash.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. Yeah, I really don't.
I look forward to seeing where the future takes me and where the future takes you as well. Yeah, so thank you. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much, buddy.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you guys to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. In upcoming episodes, we've got Todd Scanderit with Resurgence PPG helping disabled veterans get into the sky. In addition to that, we have Alexis Quintana, who is the president of the US PPA, and she's going to teach us all about the organization, what their purpose is, and the future of the organization. And there's several more exciting guests that we have, but I'll leave that to a future update. If you haven't done so already, head over to patreon.com/Anthony Vella. It's totally free. There is, of course, the option to become a paid supporter of the show, which helps tremendously because we've got lights and cameras and microphones and subscriptions that we're paying for. And hopefully, we believe that this provides a lot of lessons to individuals out there that they can learn from, and your contributions do certainly help. But if you're not in a position to support financially, you can, of course, become a free patron where you have access to my weekly blog posts, information on upcoming episodes, and the opportunity to ask our upcoming guests questions that you may have that we answered here on this show today. So if you haven't done so, head on over, once again, patreon.com/Anthony Vella, and sign up, become a patron. If you have any questions for Kit has promised that he'll go back down into the comment section of this video, right?
I did, didn't I?
Yeah.
Just then.
I think I just did.
So Kit and I and Leandra, we look forward to seeing you in the comment sections. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys in the next episode.